Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to talk more about this purchase of the Kirtland Temple and a bunch of different buildings, but specifically, we're going to be talking about the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible because I guess there were manuscripts that weren't in our possession, but now they are. And I've been talking to a few people about that, and we've wondered, is it possible that something new is going to come to light? Like, was the community of Christ holding stuff back that we didn't have access to or weren't given permission to publish or something like that? I'm going to show you what I found. So basically, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to show you what I found out so far about the Joseph Smith translation. We're going to look at a few different sources for that. And at the end of the video, we're going to go over a part of a talk by Bruce R. McConkie. This was November 3rd, 1984. And it was a BYU devotional called Joseph Smith Translation, The Doctrinal Restoration, in which he talks about some pretty interesting things. He talks about the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon and additional doctrine and scriptures that we don't have access to and stuff like that. So let's just take it from the top here. Just one thing really quick. I just noted as I was looking at the frequently asked questions document that they put out about this purchase, I guess there's a bunch of buildings that we now own in Kirtland, Ohio. So, for example, it goes through all these things right here, like, windows, rocking chair, Emma Smith's walking stick. Okay, so stuff like that, a bowl. I'm glad that we have that bowl now. And then it goes into a bunch of buildings, and the first one is the temple visitor center, and that's what we have right here, this building. So we have, I guess, this property right here with the visitor center, of course, the Kirtland Temple. I'm assuming the Joseph and Emma Smith home. I'm not exactly sure. That didn't immediately pop out. Oh, now it's going to freeze, of course. Let's go back here, but you'll notice like a bunch of things. Private residence, there's 3 of those. Small undeveloped lots in Kirtland. And then it just goes through like all these like historic homes, Aaron and Polly Johnson home, William and Rosanna Marks home, and just on and on and on. The first hotel, maintenance shop. I guess now we're starting to talk about Nauvoo after this point. I don't know. I didn't go through this with a fine-tooth comb, but it's really interesting. Like, look at all this. Like, look at all these blocks. Block 137 through, 140, then 145, 146, and on. And a bunch of blocks that are just, I guess, vacant. So that's really neat to think that maybe some of these can be developed or, maybe restored more or something. It's just really cool that we have all this land now. I guess both in Kirtland and Nauvoo. But anyway, talking about the Joseph Smith translation. Okay, so we have this Joseph Smith's printed Finney Bible with his numerous markings as part of the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. So I don't know if that was kind of like his thing where he put down notes and just kind of like, did that kind of thing. And then after that, we have manuscripts of the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. We have these ones, which are Old Testament manuscripts, and then New Testament manuscripts right here. And then publication committee manuscripts for the first complete edition of the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible as the Holy Scriptures. And frankly, I don't know what that is or what that means. It sounds like I don't know, because I think he was like still working on translations at the time that he died. I don't know. I wish I knew more. I'm sorry I'm not providing more, but some kind of complete edition of the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. So I have to wonder if like if we're going to put out a new edition of the Bible, if we're going to like incorporate, now that we have the manuscripts and I guess the rights to the Joseph Smith translation is what it seems like, are we going to put forward our own edition of the Bible with Joseph Smith translation? That I still don't know. But let me show you what it says on the church website. Okay, so this is Joseph Smith translation in Bible Dictionary. I just wanted to read this part. Excuse me. The Book of Moses and the 24th chapter of Matthew contained in the Pearl of Great Price are actual excerpts from the Joseph Smith translation, which I guess that didn't dawn on me. I guess it makes sense, but okay. Many excerpts from the Joseph Smith translation are also given in the appendix and footnotes in the edition of the King James Version that accompanies this dictionary. And we all know that. Hopefully, we're all aware of that. We've covered, Joseph Smith translations many times on this channel, but you have an entire appendix, which is essentially a book unto itself, and then you have the ones that are put in the footnotes. Okay. Let's see. The Joseph Smith translation, to some extent, assists in restoring the plain and precious things that have been lost from the Bible. See 1 Nephi 13 through 14. Okay, and then over here, we have this Joseph Smith. Oh no, that's what I just pulled up, dummy. Okay, then we have this Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. This is under church history topics. After Joseph Smith's death, the Bible translation manuscripts, which I guess that's what we just purchased, remained with his wife Emma until she gave them to her son, Joseph Smith III, who led the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The reorganized church, now Community of Christ, published Joseph's revisions in 1867 under the title The Holy Scriptures, Translated and Corrected by the Spirit of Revelation. But the volume quickly became known as the inspired version of the Bible. Brigham Young, then president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Utah, expressed skepticism of the accuracy of the publication, having not had the chance to review the manuscript sources himself. Despite possessing a handwritten copy of some revision manuscripts, the church, under President Young's direction and for a century thereafter, did not publish an edition. During the 1960s, our LDS scholar Richard P. Howard and LDS scholar Robert J. Matthews each studied the manuscripts to verify the accuracy of the published editions. The reorganized church granted the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints permission to publish excerpts as footnotes and endnotes in the 1979 LDS edition of the Bible. Continued research from this collaboration led to the publication of the Complete Bible Revision Manuscripts in 2004, and again on the Joseph Smith Papers website. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, the permission to publish the excerpts in the footnotes and endnotes didn't happen until 1979, although before that we had, I believe, the Joseph Smith Matthew and the Book of Moses. Sorry, it's still a little... I'm probably going to have to go over this many times before I completely understand this whole thing. But like I said, now I wonder, because like back then, permission to publish excerpts as footnotes and endnotes. So now that we own it, doesn't mean that we don't have to put them as footnotes and endnotes. Can we just publish the Bible with the inspired revisions? And I hope that that's the case, because it's annoying to have to, like, as you're reading the scriptures, you're reading through it and constantly checking the footnotes. I'd rather just have the Joseph Smith translation right there in the Bible. It'd be so much easier. And I think that would be the right thing to do. So I'm hoping maybe that's a possibility now. I don't know if like that's something that they might talk about this next general conference. I wouldn't be surprised if it was that or something like that. Okay, but there's more to talk about. Okay, we're going to hop over to the Wikipedia article for Joseph Smith translation. It says, today, the LDS Church describes the creation of the Joseph Smith translation / inspired version as Smith dictating, quote, inspired changes and additions to scribes. However, the LDS Church accepts only a portion of the changes found in the Joseph Smith translation / inspired version as canon. Joseph Smith Matthew and the Book of Moses, containing translations and revelatory expansions of Matthew 24 and Genesis 1 through 7 respectively, are contained in the LDS Pearl of Great Price. Thus, they are the only portions of the Joseph Smith translation / inspired version that the LDS Church has canonized as part of its standard works. Additionally, okay, so separately from Joseph Smith Matthew in the Book of Moses, additionally, over 600 of the more doctrinally significant verses from the translation are included as excerpts in the current LDS edition of the King James Version. This step has ensured an increase in the Joseph Smith translation / inspired version's use and acceptance in the LDS Church today. Now, this right here, along with other things, indicate that not all the revisions were included, because it says here the more doctrinally significant verses. So, meaning that there were some that weren't doctrinally significant. So it sounds like we got all the good stuff, and put that in our footnotes. I don't know, if it matters that the rest of it is not there. I would think that we'd want the whole thing, just simply because of the fact that Joseph Smith saw fit to correct something, even if it was minor. But okay, well, anyway, this step has ensured. Okay, no, okay. A 1974 editorial of the LDS Church-owned Church News stated, quote, "The inspired version does not supplant the King James Version as the official church version of the Bible, but the explanations and changes made by the prophet Joseph Smith provide enlightenment and useful commentary on many biblical passages." So this would be referring to, I think, these 600 verses, not the Book of Moses and Joseph Smith Matthew. Anyway, continuing, regarding the Joseph Smith translation / inspired version, Bruce R. McConkie of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles said, quote, "The Joseph Smith translation or inspired version is 1,000 times over the best Bible now existing on earth." And by the way, there's always going to be those people that want to get technical and become gospel attorneys and say, oh, well, look what they say. That means that it's not official doctrine. I don't think that that's what that's saying at all. Of course, we use the Joseph Smith translation. When you listen to General Conference talks or when you read Liahona articles, time and time again, prophets, apostles, general authorities, general officers of the church refer to the Joseph Smith translation. It's clearly authoritative. Okay, let's move on to this. This is a BYU thing. The Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. Ancient material restored or inspired commentary. Canonical or optional. Finished or unfinished. And I hate those questions. I think it's so silly to engage in that kind of thing. Like, well, is it really? And this is not a commentary on the person that wrote this, but because they're just addressing people that have those questions. I think it's silly to question that. Okay, first I wanted to read this interesting thing here. The Community of Christ seems to have mostly now rejected the Joseph Smith translation. A statement by its former president, W. Grant McMurray, is illustrative. Quote, "It is time to identify the Joseph Smith translation properly as a product of Joseph Smith's fertile and creative mind. I have not preached from it for decades. There are many fine versions available based on current scholarship and with poetic and literary power. The inspired version, Joseph Smith translation, should have no standing as an authoritative biblical version for the church." End quote. Yikes. So you can see why maybe it wasn't a big deal for them to go ahead and sell that to us, because it doesn't seem that they care about it anymore, or they haven't for a while. Okay, continuing. Let's go to this right here. In the footnotes for this paper, it says something kind of interesting about when the version that we have now with the footnotes, when that was put together. Okay, a committee of church leaders and scholars oversaw a 7-year project to produce an edition of the King James Version with Latter-day Saints study aids and notes, including excerpts from the Joseph Smith translation. Quote, the work was commissioned by the First Presidency, who appointed a Bible Aids Committee to oversee the project. This committee, later called the Scriptures Publications Committee, consisted initially of Thomas S. Monson, right, who went on to become president of the church, Boyd K. Packer, who went on to be president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and Marvin J. Ashton of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Ashton was later given another assignment, and Bruce R. McConkie was appointed. The committee called scholars, editors, and publication specialists from BYU, the Church Educational System, and Deseret Book Company to prepare Latter-day Saint-oriented aids to help readers better understand the King James text. End quote. William James Mortimer, quote, William James Mortimer. LDS publication of the Bible. In Encyclopedia of Mormonism, edition Daniel H. Ludlow, 4 volumes, like whatever. While the general description explains the Bible project as a whole, now this is the part, there's not specific information given for why or who selected the 600 passages of the Joseph Smith translation. So again, I don't really have a problem with that because I trust our apostles and those that were involved. I just wonder if, like, now that we own them, and if the church considers putting out a new version, would they include all of it together? I don't know, but okay, presumably they were selected because the Joseph Smith translation affected the reading or doctrinal understanding of some verses more than others, where a word or two was simply modified without much doctrinal significance. So I guess I would get a little bit nitpicky here and say, if Joseph Smith thought that it was significant, even if it was just a word or two, I mean, I say, put it in there. Let's just do it. I would 100% go with anything that Joseph Smith did. Any correction, any clarification, whatever. I trust Joseph Smith. I have a testimony of Joseph Smith. Okay. So with that being said, let's move on to this talk by Bruce R. McConkie, Joseph Smith translation, the doctrinal restoration. I just kind of skimmed through this because, sometimes it's just easier to do it this way, kind of like study as I make the video. And this is one of those things I'd rather just, because there was so much interesting stuff in here, I figure let's just read it. We'll do it like this. And over time, our knowledge will be refined. We'll learn more things. But this is toward the end of his talk. Now, what I did is we're not reading directly from this website like I normally would do because there is no transcription. And so I downloaded the MP3, and thankfully there are sites like this one. This is not a paid promotion, by the way. This is Converter app, and you just upload your file and then it transcribes it for you. And it doesn't do like a perfect job, obviously, but it seems to me that it did good enough. So we're going to start right here. So you'll have to forgive any typos because it was the AI. It wasn't me. It was the AI. But it looks like it's good enough. So, okay. We all believe the Book of Mormon and rejoice in its teachings. Our stamp is in sharp contrast to that of the reorganized church. So he's referring to the Community of Christ, or I guess at this time it still would have been, well, actually, I don't know. This is 1984. And it was around that time that they changed to Community of Christ. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Our stamp is in sharp contrast to that of the reorganized church. I am told they have an official position paper which says the Book of Mormon is simply a recapitulation by Joseph Smith in story form of the dominant doctrines of the sectarian world in his day. So it really seems like they changed their opinion over time about Joseph Smith. Okay, but in any event, we believe the Book of Mormon to be the Word of God. As to Latter-day Revelation, as found in the Doctrine and Covenants and in the Pearl of Great Price, we have no problem. Since the Book of Mormon is true, it follows that Joseph Smith was a prophet, and hence it is easy to believe his revelation. Where the Bible is concerned, things get a little sticky. Of course we believe it. All was specifying the King James Version. Maybe it was just fine. But there is the reservation about parts not being translated correctly. And in some minds, there seems to be a nagging uncertainty about the so-called inspired version. I just want to stop right here. So, and I guess that's to be expected, right? Anytime there's something new, anytime there's something restored, anytime there's any sort of change, whether big or small in the church, you always have people that nag about things. And sometimes it's sincerely held beliefs. Sometimes I think it's something else, mostly toxic behavior. But for those that are genuine, you know, the correct answer is to take it to the Lord and pray about it. But you should know that the church is not going to, or the Lord's not going to allow the church to be led astray. But based on what he's saying here, it seems like at that time, there were probably some that are like, oh, I don't know about this. You always have those people. After all, some say the prophet did not finish his work, and how can we be sure what he did finish is correct? Come on, guy. May I be pardoned if I say that negative attitudes and feelings about the Joseph Smith translation are simply part of the devil's program to keep the word of truth from the children of men. This is after a part where he talks about how with the Bible itself, Satan tried to keep it from the public and tried to keep it from being translated into different languages and stuff like that. And so because he lost that battle, he has to make do with what has happened and has to try and get people to believe false doctrines or misinterpret the Bible, right? So, all right, continuing. Of course, the revealed changes made by Joseph Smith are true. As much as anything in the Book of Mormon or the Doctrine and Covenants. Of course, we have adequate and authentic original sources showing the changes. As so much as are the sources of the Book of Mormon are the revelations. Of course, we should use the inspired translation, the Joseph Smith translation, in our study and teaching. When do any of us have the right to place bounds? I like this question. When do any of us have the right to place bounds on the Almighty and say, we will believe these revelations and not those? Sorry, I'm just going to say it. There are too many people that I come across as I do this channel that have this frame of mind where they think that they can just pick and choose what's valid and use, some kind of rationale to say that, oh, well, this is just that person, this apostle's opinion or whatever. That is such a dangerous and stupid road to go down. Sorry, I have to be sharp about this because I don't understand how you think you could put yourself on the same level as an apostle, someone who is called from before the foundation of the world to be an apostle, and then just override what that person says. And if it's not repeated a lot of times, that's fine. It may be his opinion, but I'm still not going to go that far and say, well, not enough people repeat what you say, so it must be wrong. You guys, let's have some faith. Like, seriously. Okay, he continues. I think much of the prejudice of the past was based on the lack of understanding and has faded away since we have published our new church edition of the King James Version with its repeated reference to the Joseph Smith translation. Let it be amiss if we made a brief overview of what the Joseph Smith translation now is and what it will one day be. Oh, I didn't see this before. what it now is, and what it will one day be. As to its present state, it contains various additions, deletions, and emendations, whatever, to the King James Version. But most importantly, it contains the Book of Moses and the 24th chapter of Matthew as published in the Pearl of Great Price. These portions have been formally canonized by us, which should establish that any changes made by the prophet are true and should be accepted. Agreed. Does anyone think that the pure revelation found in Genesis 14 about Melchizedek, or in Genesis 50 about the Nephites and Joseph Smith in the latter days, is any lesser revelation than Moses chapter 1? Does anyone think the first chapter of John's Gospel is any less worth than the 24th chapter of Matthew? True, the Joseph Smith translation, though completed to the point that the early brethren were going to publish it at one time. That answers the question we were asking earlier, I think. It was completed to the point that the early brethren were going to publish it at one time. That must be in reference to this. Publication Committee manuscripts for the first complete edition of the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible as the Holy Scriptures. That must be what that's referring to. Okay. Okay, so true, the Joseph Smith translation, though completed to the point that the early brethren were going to publish it at one time, has not been completed in the full and true sense. But for that matter, neither was the Book of Mormon. I am as anxious to read and study what is in the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon, as I am to give the same attention to those parts of the Bible yet to be revealed. So he seems to be indicating that there's going to be more, probably not Joseph Smith translation, but what if it's Russell M. Nelson translation or Dallin H. Oaks translation of the Bible? Oh my gosh, if that happened, I know there'd be people that would have issues with that. How sad. Okay, I am clear in my mind that the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon will not come forth until the millennium. In case any of you had that question, I think some people maybe have. I'm going with this and what he said. I'll have to see if anyone else has commented, but not until the millennium. The same thing is undoubtedly true of the fullness of the Bible, though some additions could well be made before that time. It'll be interesting to see if they are. It'll be interesting to see if some of the other verses outside of the 600 verses are now incorporated into the scriptures, and maybe there are, even though they are of a lesser degree, still very important. You know what I mean? A more complete Joseph Smith translation than what we have now. Okay. Of what will the Bible consist when it is perfected? Surely it will contain writings of Adam and Enoch and Noah, of Melchizedek and Isaac and Jacob, and certainly Abraham wrote much more than the prophet found on the Egyptian papyrus. The book of Abraham in our Pearl of Great Price is obviously a restored biblical record. Does anyone think we have all the words of Isaiah or Jeremiah or Malachi? And are there not prophets and apostles without number whose names we don't even know, who have recorded their teachings and testimonies? The perfected Bible of the future will surely include all that was on the brass plates of Laban. Indeed, Lehi prophesied that these plates of brass should go forth into all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people who are of his seed. Wherefore he said that these plates of brass should never perish, neither should they be dimmed any more by time. More than 500 years later, Alma testified that these should be kept and preserved by the hand of the Lord until they should be brought forth unto every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, and that they shall know of the mysteries contained therein, and that they would retain their brightness. Someday the Lord will raise up a prophet who will also be a seer and a translator, to whom he will give the brass plates. Man, I'm gonna have to put some of this in my my quotes A through Z. This is incredible stuff. That they may be translated for the benefit and blessing of those in all nations. Would God that the work commence at least in our day, though we in fact have no such hope? Why should the Lord give us what is on the brass plates or in the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon, when we do not even treasure up and live by what has already been given us? The Bible went forth to the Gentile nations in the early days of the Christian era, according to the angelic word of Tunefi. This must be that can't be Moroni. There's no way that the AI made that big of a mistake. If you know which angel this is talking about, put it in the comments. According to the angelic word of Tunefi, probably Nephi, I don't know, contains the covenants of the Lord which he hath made unto the house of Israel, and also contains many of the prophecies of the holy prophets, and it is a record like unto the engravings which are upon the plates of brass, save they are not so many. Thereafter the many plain and precious parts which were taken away by the servants in the house of that great church, which is not the Lord's church. Thus our present Bible contains only a fraction of the holy word that once was compiled and included in it as the acceptable word of the Lord. I'm going to pause right here. I've seen critics of the church be like, well, no, look, the translation is correct. Like, you look at, this manuscript, this is, from this particular year, whatever BC or AD. And it looks like they did a pretty good job at translating it. The problem is, and I've pointed this out, I did another video about this, like a separate video about this. We don't have the originals of any book in our possession. The only ones that we ever did really was the gold plates. When Joseph Smith had the gold plates, he had the original record. But as far as like any book in the Bible, including the New Testament, we do not have the originals. So the question is, how does what we have currently, how does that stack up to the original when it was originally written? And we don't know that. And we never will know that, because they're gone. Unless like the Lord preserve them, in a heavenly archive, they're gone. And so that's what the problem is. And I was kind of shocked to find out when I did a little bit of research, like just like with the New Testament, for example, that's more closer in time to us than the Old Testament. We don't have the originals of those. You only go back to a certain point, and the further back you go, the more fragmented the scrolls and pieces of scrolls are. You just have fragments. But to have the original, it doesn't exist. You can't find it. It doesn't matter if you find Dead Sea Scrolls. Those are not the originals. You have to have the originals and translate from that. And so it would seem to me that from the time of the originals until the oldest copies that we currently have, something happened. And that's not too hard to imagine, given the type of people there are in this world. The kind of people that are always griping and complaining against the prophet about this or that always have some kind of issue when something new is introduced into the church. It's not hard to imagine that people back in those times would change things, destroy things, remove things. Okay, let's continue. From various Book of Mormon references, we gain a glimpse of what is on the brass plates. They contain the record of the Jews down to the days of Zedekiah, including the genealogies of the people and the prophecies of the holy prophets, among which are the words of Isaiah and portions of Jeremiah. They contain in their perfect form the law of Moses and the 5 books of Moses, see, in their perfect form. It'd be interesting to see how that matches up with what we currently have. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They contain the writings of Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, than which few have been greater, and on them is found the mysteries of God and the commandments he has given to the children of men. It contains books of Holy Scripture, of which the world does not dream, including the writings of, now I know these ones, Zenock, Nahum, and Zenos, right, that we've learned about in the Book of Mormon. What interests, I wish this was a perfect transcription. What interests us more than the books included in the brass plates is the tone and tenor and general approach of the gospel and to the salvation that they set for. They are gospel-oriented and speak of Christ and the various Christian concepts which the world falsely assumes to have originated with Jesus and the early apostles. For instance, Zenock taught that the God of our fathers who were led out of Egypt, out of bondage, and also were preserved in the wilderness by him, yea, the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob, yielded himself according to the words of the angel as a man unto the hands of wicked men to be lifted up according to the words of Zenock. Nahum taught that Christ would be crucified, and Zenos taught that he would be buried in the sepulcher in connection with the 3 days of darkness, which should be a sign given of his death into those who should inhabit the isles of the sea, more especially given unto those who are of the house of Israel. Yeah, so that right there, that's pretty astounding that we have in the Book of Mormon some of these Old Testament prophets that knew some very plain and precious things about Christ and how they did know back then about these things about Christ and what was going to happen, whereas people that didn't like that idea took it out, right? If you were to show that to modern day Jews, they would be astounded. They don't even know about Zenos and Zenock in these prophecies. That things were very clear. Something went very, very wrong somewhere along the line back then. Okay. Indeed, it was Zenos who wrote of the visit of the Lord of Israel after his resurrection, of the joy and salvation that would come to the righteous among them, of the desolations and destructions that awaited the wicked among them, of the fires and tempests and earthquakes that would occur in the Americas, of the scourging and crucifying of the God of Israel by those in Jerusalem, of the scattering of the Jews among all nations, and of their gathering together again in the last days from the 4 quarters of the earth. I do not think I overstate the matter when I say that next to Isaiah himself, who is the prototype, pattern, and model for all the prophets, there was not a greater prophet in all Israel than Zenos, and our knowledge of his inspired writings is limited to the quotations and paraphrasing summaries found in the Book of Mormon. Our understanding of the prophetic word will be greatly expanded if we know how one prophet quotes another, usually without acknowledging his source. Either Isaiah or Micah copied the prophetic words of the other relative to the mount of the Lord's house being established in the last days, with all nations flowing thereunto. Their ministries overlapped, but we assume that the lesser Micah copied from the greater Isaiah and then appended some words of his own about the millennial era. Some unnamed Old Testament prophet, who obviously was Zenos, as the Book of Mormon testifies, spoke of the day when the wicked would be destroyed as stubble, when the righteous would be led up as calves of the stall, when Christ should rise from the dead with healing in his wings, and when the Holy One of Israel would then reign on earth. Malachi, who lived more than 200 years after Nephi, uses these very expressions in his prophetic writings. Then we do other than conclude, or can we do anything other than conclude that both Nephi and Malachi had before them the writings of Zenos? Both Paul and Mormon expounded the great inspiration about faith, hope, and charity in many verses using the same words and phrases. Is there any difference between them? If there is any difference between them, it is that Mormon expounds the doctrines more perfectly and persuasively than does Paul. It does not take much insight to know that Paul and Mormon both had before them the writings of some Old Testament prophet on the same subjects. It is perfectly clear that John the Beloved is copying in the first chapter of the Gospel of John words written by John the Baptist, and a practice with which we have no fault to find. Thus the Lord has revealed his doctrine in precise language to a chosen prophet. There is no reason why he should inspire another prophet to choose the same words in presenting the same doctrine on a subsequent occasion. It is much easier and simpler to quote that which has already been given in perfection. We are all commanded, including the prophets among us, to search the scriptures and thereby learn what other prophets have presented. The Lord did not reveal anew to Nephi what Isaiah had written. Rather, Nephi was commanded to quote them as they were found on the brass plates. Then he was free to expound them as the Spirit directed. Everyone is entitled to receive the same revelations and view the same visions. God is no respecter of persons. If any of us saw the vision of the degrees of glory, there would be no reason for us to write it anew in the words of Joseph Smith. It has already been recorded in the way the Lord designated or designed. If we were to quote in a book of scripture we were writing, we would do it in the language of the original originating prophet. As a sidelight to our present discussion, it is clearly evident that the Jews in Jesus' day had more Old Testament scriptures than we have. Jesus reminded the Jews that Abraham saw the day of the coming of the Son of Man, which fact is not in our Old Testament, but has been restored in Genesis 15. That's really interesting, right? So that's really bad. The Jews of that day, when they had a clearer understanding of who Christ was and how prophecy was going to be fulfilled, they had more knowledge than what we have right now, or what Jews have right now, and they still rejected him. All right, continuing. You'd quote it from the book of Enoch, which book has not yet been restored to us. Paul has much to say about Melchizedek and the holy priesthood, which remained hidden until put again in Genesis 14 with the Joseph Smith translation. But let us return to our subject, the doctrinal restoration, and draw some proper conclusions. One question. What is being restored in this dispensation of the fullness of times? We are in process of receiving all that God has spoken by the mouths of all his holy prophets since the world began. Only a small portion has come to us so far. We do not as yet begin to know what the ancients knew. That which has come to us anew breaks the shackles of the past and opens up entirely new vistas to us. It is all Christ-centered, gospel-centered, priesthood-centered, church-centered. It lets us know that all the ancient saints had the same gospel, the same hope in Christ, the same holy priesthood, and the same celestial marriage, the same church, and the same apostolic power. The same gifts of the Spirit, the same system of religion that we have. Except for a few things relative to salvation for the dead, we have not yet received one syllable of Scripture, one trace of truth, one gospel verity, one saving power that was not had anciently. The time is yet future. It will be millennial. When the Lord reveals to us those things which have been hidden from the foundations of the earth, and which have never yet been given to man. And boy, oh boy, you've got to wonder what that is. I think I've said this before, but when I used to work for this major credit card company in Utah, you know, the nature of organizations, you know, companies, especially big companies, you know, things change. You refine processes, you change strategies, you know. And there was this thing that would always happen where some new training would come out, some new process or whatever, and I would just like dread it because, you know, I was already in my groove, or the new change was more difficult, it required more of me, And by the time that I quit, I was just like, oh my gosh, like there'd be like a new thing coming out just before I quit. And I'd have the thought, I am so glad I don't have to worry about that. I'm so glad that I'm out of here. And that's happened a few times with various places that I've worked. But it's like it's the same with the gospel. Not that you have changing doctrines, but that you have more revealed truth. And we're supposed to be more and more perfect, live a higher and holier way, which requires more effort. So I wouldn't be surprised if things are kind of like a little bit more difficult in the millennium, as far as like how we're supposed to constrain our natural man, than what they are now. I can't say that for sure, but it's probably going to be changes in behavior, like new enlightened ways of living life and how we should live, as well as maybe just things that we didn't know before about the nature of the earth. In the scriptures, it says that we'll know more about the earth by the process by which it was made and stuff like that. So there's going to be just like deeper understanding of things as well. But I would think that there'd be like new commandments and stuff like that. Okay, number 2. Question: how and in what way is the new knowledge being restored? Answer: by revelation. Our doctrine is not handed down in the sectarian sense. It is revealed. It is revealed directly, as in the case of the Doctrine and Covenants, or by the process of translation, as in the case of the Book of Mormon, or by the process of perfecting ancient scriptures, as in the case of the Joseph Smith translation. This generation, our generation, the generation that shall be until the coming of the Son of Man, is to have the Lord's word through Joseph Smith, and to some degree through his successors. I like this. I like this right here. This generation, our generation, the generation that will be until the coming of the Son of Man. Here we go. I have a new generational statement. I have a spreadsheet where I have quotes made about certain generations, and it's pretty eye-opening. So this is going to be, I better highlight this so I don't forget it. Let's just highlight it. This green color. Well, let's need some sunglasses for that. Okay, 3. What are the vehicles of the revelation? Answer: first, the Book of Mormon, which was translated by the gift and power of God. Second, the Doctrine and Covenants, which contains the revealed word coupled with some inspired utterances, as the King Follett's sermon. And thirdly, the so-called translations, which include the Book of Abraham, the Book of Moses, itself part of the inspired version, and the whole Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. None of these vehicles have given us their full load. We only have about a third of the Book of Mormon. The field of revelation is without bounds or limits. In the Bible restoration has scarcely been commenced. The Bible restoration has scarcely been commenced. Man, this talk is crazy. But it's truth. You know it. When you put it all together and you think about it, you know what he's saying is true. Okay, 4. Question: When will we receive more of the mind and will of the Lord? And when will the great doctrinal restoration be completed? We have a revealed answer as to when we shall receive the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon. What we have so far received is to test our faith. So that's interesting, because I guess that means that if we knew the rest of it, we would be like, oh yeah, this is true. There's no way that anybody could know this. It would rob you of your faith. You'd be like, oh yeah, well, okay, this is absolutely true. Okay. When we repent of all of our iniquity and become clean before the Lord, or you could say live a higher, holier way. And when we exercise faith in him, like unto the faith of the brother of Jared, then the sealed portion of the ancient word will be translated and read from the housetops. The same is certainly true of the brass plates in the lost portions of the Bible. What we have received so far is to test our faith. Why should the Lord give us more of the biblical word if we are indifferent to what he has already revealed? Does anyone think the Lord should give us the words of Zenos when we are ignoring the words of Isaiah? There are revelations without end that are available to the faithful at any time they are prepared to receive them. As a matter of practical reality, however, the great doctrinal restoration is to be millennial. Of that day, Nephi said, then the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Wherefore the things of all nations shall be made known, yea, all things shall be made known unto the children of men. There is nothing which is secret, save it shall be revealed. There is no work of darkness, save it shall be manifest in the light. And there is nothing which is sealed upon the earth, save it shall be loosed. Wherefore all things which have been revealed unto the children of men shall at that day be revealed, and Satan shall have power over the hearts of the children of men no more for a long time. The blessed millennial era. Number 5. Perhaps these are some of the final great questions we should ask. Is the restored word true? Is it the mind and will and voice of the Lord? Because the Joseph Smith translation as it now stands and without more have divine... Okay. Because the Joseph Smith translation as it now stands and without more have divine approval, and should we use it? By way of answer, let us ask, is the Book of Mormon true, and should we use it? We all know it is true, even though there is more of it to come forth. Is the divine word of the Doctrine and Covenants true? Of course, even though new revelations lie ahead. Is the book of Abraham true? Yes, but it is not complete. It stops almost midair. Would that prophet had gone on in his translation or revelation, as the case may be. Yes, the inspired version is inspired. Yes, the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible is Holy Scripture. In one sense of the word, it is the crowning part of the doctrinal restoration. At least it sets the pattern and marks the way as to know the doctrinal rivers of the past yet still flow into the ocean of the present, as shall surely be in the fullness of times. Something so testified, may I leave you with the word... Okay, something so testified, may I leave you with these words to ponder. Thus said the Lord, thou fool, that shall say a Bible, we have got a Bible, and we need no more Bible. Have ye obtained the Bible, save it were by the Jews? It is a perfect Bible. Is it a perfect Bible, or have any of its plain and precious parts been lost? Does it set forth the doctrines and the covenants and doctrines of the Lord as they were revealed to his ancient people? Wherefore, murmuring because they... Oh my gosh, sorry, this is... Okay. Wherefore, murmuring because that ye shall receive more of my word, saith the Lord. For my attempt in these somewhat rambling remarks has been to place the Joseph Smith translation of God's holy word in its proper relationship to the great doctrinal restoration. In the very nature of things, this includes the evidence, proof, and witness that one of the great contributions, perhaps the greatest contribution of the inspired word, is to open the doors of our understanding to the marvelous reality that Christ and his gospel, with all its gifts, powers, and graces, has been had among men in diverse dispensations from the days of Adam to its present hour. Are we at the end here? Yeah. I have not dwelled upon specifics, but have chosen rather to unveil the whole broad panorama. Many of you have greater expertise than I do where these specifics are concerned. My good friend Robert Matthews is, of course, the world authority on the Joseph Smith translation. And I think that's who was mentioned here. Robert J. Matthews. When we were reading this from Church History Topics, he's the one that worked with our LDS scholar Richard P. Howard. Okay, back to this. But I am pleased to say in closing that this inspired work by the great prophet of the Restoration is one of the great evidences of his divine calling. One of the reasons we know he was the mighty prophet of the Restoration is the inspired translation and revision of the Holy Bible. God grant us the wisdom to walk in the light of that great beacon of understanding that he has lighted for us for our benefit and blessing, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Wow, this was a really good talk. And it's exciting because, this was 1984, and here we are in 2024, and we're so much closer to actually seeing these things. And I think it will be pretty soon. The way that things are going, it's like Neil A. Maxwell said, that there's going to be a compression of events in the last days. And there has been, especially during President Nelson's time, there's been a compression of events. I mean, for goodness sake, the Kirtland temple back in our possession, and now we have all this as well, and all these assets and property and stuff. It's just, oh my gosh, what next? What next? Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.